You gotta love Ryan Fitzpatrick. I mean, whether he's Fitzmagic or Fitztragic, he's one of the most interesting players in the league. I'm not sure there's any player like him, where when he's hot, he can play at an elite level. However, when he's cold, he looks like one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. There's a lot to break down, but let's just jump into it. If you take a look at this play, for example, this is when he played the Saints and had that breakout game where he threw for over 400 yards, they put up 48 points, and were able to beat the team that ended up going to the NFC Championship game. It's a cover 2 man, and those are the routes that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be running, and one thing you want to take a look at is take a look at that safety right there. There is a Buccaneer who appears to be trying to get open right about there, and so he's going to actually crash in to try to make sure that doesn't happen. But of course, the problem is, now his initial assignment is basically completely open, and there is a Tampa Bay Buccaneer running a route right there, so this is now very good news for the Bucs. But that's not too impressive. I mean, this play design was designed for that safety to either stay back and allow a receiver to get open underneath, or to have him go underneath and then hit the receiver deep. What's really impressive for me is look at how late Fitzpatrick throws this ball. He's trying to get this ball off at the perfect time, and is even willing to take a hit to make sure the ball gets off and gets into Evans' hands. He throws it right before getting hit. Mike Evans does make the catch, and they're able to get the ball all the way to the 5-yard line. That's one of the things that definitely helped Fitzpatrick last season, was the fact that Tampa Bay had so many talented receivers, and one of those guys was Mike Evans. Evans was clearly a guy Fitzpatrick loved to throw to, and here's an example of him doing just that. If you take a look, it's going to be a cover 1 linebacker blitz, and those are the routes the Tampa Bay receivers will be running. That's Evans' route, and it's a pretty standard curl route just right over there. So as of right now, Evans is just getting ready to cut back, but if you take a look at Fitzpatrick, he's already thrown the ball. That's kind of one of the things that makes Fitzpatrick fun to watch, is he has total faith in his receivers to make plays. He's going to be willing to swing it, and he's going to be willing to throw it to his guys and try to make something happen. Sometimes it doesn't work out too well, but sometimes it works out very well. Like this play, Evans does run up, make the catch, and pick up some more yards after the catch. That's kind of what people talk about most often with Fitzpatrick. I'm sure everyone's telling Dolphins fans, you got a gunslinging quarterback as your new quarterback, but really that's not the only thing that Fitzpatrick can do. One of the very underrated things about Fitzpatrick is his ability to move around in the pocket and even rush for yards if there's yards there. Like on this play, for example, it's going to be a cover 1 hole, and if you look at the route concept Tampa Bay is running, it's kind of an interesting one, and by interesting I mean it's literally the same thing for all 5 receivers. It's 5 wide, and they're all running curl routes just past the first down marker. Also worth mentioning, this was a 3rd down play late in that game when they were up 8, so this was a crucial play for Tampa Bay to convert. If they get the first down, they can need a ball and end the game, but if they don't get it, this now means that they're punting the ball back to Drew Brees, who only needs to score 8 to tie the game, and you're going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense, so you might as well just put 8 points on the board if that happens. But one thing worth noting on this play is take a look at the 2 defensive linemen on the top half of the screen. What they're going to actually do is have their interior linemen basically run in between Tampa Bay's left tackle and left guard to try to draw them into each other and try to draw a double team, and then their edge rusher will break to the right tackle's right, which will, in theory, allow him to get through and get to Fitzpatrick. Now, if you notice, this play doesn't actually work out too well. Tampa Bay's left guard, Ali Marpet, does a very good job of hanging with that edge rusher and making sure he doesn't get past him. But another thing worth noting is now because of this switch, this now means that there's no containment and Fitzpatrick can break to the top half of the screen. He reads that right away and moves out and is able to rush for the first down. It was a smart play by Fitzpatrick. It's also something that Fitzpatrick is always looking to do. He's always ready to run the ball if necessary. One of the things coaches will always tell young quarterbacks right out of college is don't try to run the ball. If a hole does develop, then take the hole, but don't have the mindset of you're going to scramble to try to pick up some yards. This one's another interesting one. This was actually the first play of the game, and it's pretty interesting because it seems to be it's going to be a setup play. There's a fullback and halfback in the game, so it appears as though it's going to be a run, and they're going to try to set something up. Philadelphia is actually running a cover 1 blitz, but instead of having a linebacker be the one blitzing, they're actually going to have a corner on the outside be the one who's blitzing. And that matters because Tampa Bay doesn't have too many routes going deep, which means that there's not going to be too many Eagles now deep as well. And also worth noting, that is DeSean Jackson's route, and it should be cutting right into the middle of that gap right over there, so it shouldn't be a great route against this type of coverage. However, now take a look at that Eagles safety who's deep. He's actually going to be cutting in right now, as he's expecting DeSean Jackson to cut in as well. And I think he also has a thought process of, well, he has a teammate who's further deep than DeSean Jackson, so even if DeSean Jackson does continue running straight, then he still has a teammate who's in the area and could make a play. But what Jackson is actually doing is running that route, where he's going to actually cut to the middle of the field, which is going to allow him to get wide open. I also think it's worth mentioning that Fitzpatrick is running out of time, and he has a receiver who's wide open right there at the 33-yard line. That could be an easy first down, but where's the fun in that? Fitzpatrick definitely is the kind of guy who it seems like he's just going out there to have fun. He's going to take chances and throw the ball deep, and that ends up being the perfect decision, as DeSean Jackson does end up getting wide open and makes the catch. Sure, Deshaun Jackson did the rest of the work and got the ball into the end zone for a touchdown, but it was set up because of the great pass by Fitzpatrick and because of just the gutsy decision by Fitzpatrick. Tampa Bay definitely did have a plethora of weapons last season, but if you're going into a war, you might as well use every weapon you have in your arsenal, and Fitzpatrick absolutely did. Like on this play, for example, it's a cover 2 zone, and those are the routes the Tampa Bay Buccaneers will be running, and there is a route right there that could get into a gap in coverage right around the 37-yard line. Although also worth mentioning, O.J. Howard is running that route right there, and it is going to be in a gap in coverage. However, since there is a cut, it kind of becomes man coverage in a sense, and that's a good route to beat man coverage, so that wouldn't be a terrible route to throw to as well. So as you see right now, there is a Tampa Bay receiver who looks kind of open, but the problem is that there is an eagle right below him and an eagle right above him. Fitzpatrick knows if he throws it there, then if he throws it just a little bit under or a little bit over, it could easily be an interception. So instead what he's going to do is look over to O.J. Howard. Now Howard isn't really open at this point, but he's basically just going to trust that O.J. Howard can win his 1-on-1 matchup. He knows Howard is a very talented player, and so he's just going to throw it his way. Not only does Howard win his 1-on-1 matchup, but then he breaks all the way to the outside and is going to eventually run for a touchdown on his play. So again, I think a lot of people would say, okay, well Fitzpatrick only threw for 15 yards and O.J. Howard did the rest of the work. And I mean, yeah, that's probably a fair statement to make. But at the same time, if you have a talented player, put him in a position to make big-time plays, and that's what Fitzpatrick did on that play. That play will definitely be shown on more O.J. Howard highlight reel plays than Ryan Fitzpatrick highlight reel plays, but that's okay because the result was still a touchdown. So that's Ryan Fitzmagic, right? That's the good side of him, is he can make some very good reads at times, and he has a lot of faith in his receivers, and especially when his receivers are good, it can often lead to good things happening for Fitzpatrick. But unfortunately for him, Fitzmagic isn't the only nickname he has. There is also Fitztragic, and this next play will show you exactly why. It's going to be a cover 4 zone, and what Tampa Bay is going to do here is have a receiver run that route right there, and they're going to have another receiver run right there and try to get underneath him. So the play design is pretty simple. Since there is a receiver running deep on the corner of the end zone at the top right-hand corner of the screen, the hope is that he'll force the 2 Redskins in that area to run deep, and then allow the other Tampa Bay Buccaneer who's running underneath him to then be able to be open and make a catch. This really is designed to be a cover 3 or potentially even a cover 2, much more so than a cover 4. But it can still work against a cover 4, although really you'd want it to happen against a cover 3. And the reason for that is because now, as you see, there is a Redskin who is Josh Norman, who's now keeping pace and running somewhat farther back. But he also looks over and realizes that there is another Tampa Bay Buccaneer who is going to get open underneath him. Now, Norman makes an incredible play to jump back and realize what's going on and intercept the ball, and also the throw just wasn't the best. But it also should be mentioned, it seems like Fitzpatrick was kind of just testing his luck a little bit too much on this one. He got a little bit too confident in himself. He felt like he could make this throw, even though it was a cover 4 and it's really designed to be the cover 3, and it just wasn't the best decision from Fitzpatrick, but also just wasn't the best throw from Fitzpatrick. If this was a cover 3, that kind of throw probably just falls incomplete, but because it's a cover 4 and the risk was a lot higher, he probably shouldn't have made that throw because something like that can't happen. He also has a tendency to make mistakes like this. If you take a look, it is going to be a cover 1 linebacker blitz, and O.J. Howard is going to be running that route right over there. So as of right now, there is a decent amount of separation in between Howard and his assigned target. So if he was cutting right now, it'd be a great situation to throw it to him and try to pick up some yards. But the problem is Howard isn't cutting now. Howard's cutting another 3 or 4 yards down the field where he won't be as open. But Fitzpatrick kind of likes what he sees, and he's kind of just going to say, you know what, screw it, I think I can fit it through there anyways. And it's just the wrong decision. It's once again Fitzpatrick kind of just getting a little bit too excited and making a throw that he probably shouldn't have made. It ends up getting intercepted, and those 2 plays right there were kind of a huge part of why Tampa Bay had over 500 yards of offense and just 3 points on that game. The reality is he really just does force some throws sometimes, and this one will be another good example. If you take a look, it's a cover 2 man, and that route is O.J. Howard's route, which actually is a great route to beat a cover 2 man. There is a slight cut. It's not as big as you would like in this play, but it still is a slight cut, so it could work. And since it's a cover 2 man, all that has to happen is O.J. Howard has to win his 1-on-1 matchup, which he totally has a tendency of doing. But it's also worth mentioning that Mike Evans is running that route right there, which is a great route to beat cover 2 man in certain situations. If the safety in the top left-hand corner of the screen doesn't end up going too far to the top of the screen or too far to the left of the screen, this now means that Mike Evans could get past him, and it could be a great route to throw to, and even more so considering the fact that there is press coverage right there. But it really seemed like Fitzpatrick had already made up his mind before the ball was even snapped. I mean, if you take a look, Evans absolutely does have a step on his assigned man, and a giant safety isn't too far to the left or too far up, that Mike Evans could be open on that corner of the end zone. But instead, Fitzpatrick is going to look to O.J. Howard, who totally isn't open on this play. The throw ends up being a little bit low and intercepted, and really that's the downside to Fitzpatrick having complete faith in his receivers. O.J. Howard is a really talented tight end, but I don't care if you're Rob Gronkowski, when you throw it that low, it's going to get intercepted. You can have all the talented receivers you want, but when you're trying to fit it through tight windows, sometimes you're going to miss the throw, and it's going to result in interception. One more slight flaw I found in his game is that sometimes he focuses too hard on plays that would work in paper, but don't actually work when it actually is developing. Like if you take a look at this one, there's a ton of space in between Janoris Jenkins and Deshaun Jackson, and he's actually running a slant route, I mean, this could be a great route to throw to if you're Ryan Fitzpatrick. But Fitzpatrick actually throws it there before the ball is even really snapped. And it's also play action, and Fitzpatrick is so excited to try to get this ball to Deshaun Jackson that he ends up faking the handoff and throwing so quickly he doesn't even have time to look over and see what's going on. Jackson ends up being a little bit lackadaisical on this route, and also Jenkins just made a great play to break in and end up tipping the ball up, which resulted in an interception and a pick six. So that part isn't really fully to blame on Fitzpatrick. However, I do think he deserves some blame in the fact that he didn't notice either of those two things happening because he was so ready to already throw the ball to Deshaun Jackson because that play was going to work on paper. That's not the end of the world. Plenty of quarterbacks would make that mistake. If you're going to be a top 15 quarterback in the league, you probably can't make that mistake, but Fitzpatrick clearly isn't that. He's kind of in one of those weird situations where he's not quite good enough to be a full-time starter, but he's also not quite bad enough to be a bad backup. He's kind of in that situation where he's either going to be one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the league or one of the best backup quarterbacks in the league. I personally think there's actually a lot of good in having him as a backup because he can break out and have those big games where he'll steal you a couple of wins. So if Miami is thinking about drafting a quarterback and having Fitzpatrick as their backup, it makes a ton of sense. And honestly, if Miami is thinking about just having him as their starter, I think that makes some sense too, because at least he's going to be fun to watch. So I would say I like the move from Miami's perspective, and I'll be interested to see how he does there and if he even gets some starts there. I'm not sure what they're going to do in terms of getting a new quarterback or not. My guess is they probably will at least at some point draft a quarterback, whether it's in the first round or second or third round. They will at some point probably use some draft capital to get a new quarterback. But at the very least, it should be very interesting to watch next season.